Building a boat awning is fairly easy. All you need to do is determine the desired width and the desired length. Length is usually determined along the boom. Sailrite recommends using Sunbrella, Surelast, or Stamoid as a fabric choice. To determine how much fabric you need, take the fabric's width. That will be X. Then use the desired finished awning's width. That'll be Y. Then plug those measurements in inches into this formulae. This first calculation, Y plus 5. 5 is the amount of allowance we're adding for hems or sleeves. The second calculation, X minus 0.5. 0.5 is seam allowance. Once Z is determined, that is the number of panels that you will need. Now take the desired finished awning length, and we'll call that L, and add 5 inches for hems and possibly sleeves, and multiply that by Z, which has been rounded up to a whole number. This equals the fabric required for your awning. The best way to start your awning project is to draw it out on paper. We'll be using the overlapping seam in this video. That only requires a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We'll be installing a hem, which will take 2 1/4 or 2 1/2 inch for each one of the edges. Here's the hem along the length of the fabric as well. If you desire to put a sleeve in lieu of a hem, you may need more fabric at these edges. Depending on your awning application, you may choose to use a PVC tube or even a batten to slide through a sleeve to stiffen your awning. If you need to do that, then in lieu of the 5 inches that we accounted for, you may need to add more inches for this sleeve. So if that needs to be done, then you need to add the appropriate amount of material to construct this sleeve. Some people find it helpful just to use a telescopic awning pole, and that can be used outside of a sleeve as shown here in the illustration. To do this, just simply use webbing and a snap shackle at each one of the corners, and then you can use the 4-spar telescopic awning pole. It is not uncommon when sewing long lengths to have a 1/2 inch shrinkage per 10 foot of sewing. You may want to calculate for this needle pucker phenomenon. In this video, we're going to be constructing this awning with an overlapping seam, as shown here. Some people prefer to use the flat-felled seam, as shown here in the video. If you use this seam, there's more labor involved, but it does result in a beautiful seam because both sides are finished and folded over. In lieu of a 1/2 inch seam, you would need to use a 1 1/2 inch seam. If the fabric needs to be cut to size, mark the fabric appropriately. Then if you're using Sunbrella, use a hot knife. This seals the edge. If you're using the factory edge, it's already been sealed for you. If you've chosen Surelast or Stamoid fabric, there's no need to use a hot knife. If you choose to use the flat-felled seam, all edges will be hidden, so it's not necessary to use a hot knife. In lieu of a hot knife, you can use a wood burning tool or a soldering iron. All of the awning kits include brass rings and webbing for your corner attachment points or center attachment points. You can also use grommets, but that requires a die set. Alright, Deb has all the panels cut. Now she's using a ruler here, or yardstick, and marking the seam allowance. It's a 1/2 inch. So she's going to be joining all the panels together. Once she has it marked a 1/2 inch, she'll draw a straight line to indicate where each panel will lay. Basically, apply double-sided tape and lay each panel on top of one of these lines. There's the double-sided tape that's included in the kit. Double-sided tape is very advantageous because you can use it to hold panels in place prior to sewing. We highly recommend the use of double-sided tape. Once the double-sided tape has been applied, she'll take the second panel, peel off the paper backing to reveal the glue, and then she'll match up that second panel with that line that she drew. That line is a 1/2 inch from that edge.
You'll have your 1/2 inch overlay.
This is the overlapping seam. All edges have been hot knifed or either they're factory sealed.
Which will hold it in place. You tape that all the way up until you have it all together, and then you can run your single stitches down.
We're done now. We're jumping ahead.
Okay, we have the center all basted together, so now we're going to roll the sides in so we can fit it under our machine.
By scrolling the material like this, you can control the sewing a lot easier. If you have an alter feed sewing machine or a smaller one, we recommend you sew it on the floor. This is a Serite 111, and you notice she's doing a reverse to lock the straight stitch in place. It's a good idea to sew with a maximum stitch length. That helps to avoid needle pucker, which can shrink your panel up to approximately a 1/2 inch per 10 foot.
Once you have that edge sewed, you want to put 2 rows of stitching. So you just take it, flip it, so that your rolled edge stays toward you. And then you have another edge to follow. It makes it a lot easier for sewing it down together.
She'll now sew the second row of straight stitches right next to the other. We're not going to show this whole process, but we've basted and sewn all 4 of these panels.
Okay, once you get your seams all put together, you want to measure your cover completely to make sure that you have the length and width that you're looking for. At that time, you can make your hem smaller if you've, for some reason, gotten too small, or you can make them deeper if you're too big.
If you're using a batten or a PVC tube which slides into a sleeve, then you need to construct the hem as shown here to allow that batten or PVC tube to slide through.
But you should come out just right if you allow yourself a 1/2 inch for your seams. And I usually figure at least 2 inches, if not 2 1/4 for your double hems.
This panel has been measured already, and so Deb's going to work on each one of the hems.
Then I go along the edge and mark for my hems. I mark up 2 1/4 inches.
She'll then strike a line where she's placed her marks. For your information, she's using a soapstone pencil. These are great because the marking will actually come off when you don't want it there. Now she takes double-sided tape and bastes it along the raw edge of the canvas. You can see that yellow line on the canvas, and she marks or folds to the yellow line and bastes it all in place. So she'll do this along this one edge first, and then she'll create a second hem. So this is a double hem. Alright, we've jumped ahead now, and that first baste is done, and now she's working on the second basting tape application. And once she's done with that, she'll fold it over again to create that double hem. Peel off the paper, reveal the glue, and then baste it down in place. So here she is peeling off the paper to reveal the glue. And then she folds it over right over that edge.
Okay, now once you get your hem basted down, now what I did was I put the basting tape on, folded it to my line, because that folded the second time is where you want your edge to be, is on that line.
Prior to doing any more hems, we'll take this hem over to the sewing machine and sew a straight stitch, remembering to reverse the beginning and the end to lock your stitch in place. You can sew it on the inner hem and the outer edge of the hem if you like to make it a little bit more secure, but in this application we're just going to sew once to secure that hem down. Here it is with it finished. We've done 2 hems. Now before we move on and complete the other 2 hems, we'll actually measure to make sure that this awning is the perfect size. So if we need to cut it down, we can do that by changing the hem, or extend it. We can do that by changing the hem. So we measure the one side and the other side to complete the other 2 hems. We're not going to show sewing the other 2 hems, but we've already done that.
Okay, on this awning we're going to be running a piece of webbing through the center of it, just for reinforcement.
The halyard will attach to a point, or maybe more than one point, in the center of this awning, so we're going to provide some support down the length of the boom. Deb's marked the center of the awning.
And you'll want to do that in a few different spots. Okay, you can either run the basting tape right on the webbing, or you can put it on the canvas.